Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I never thought my marriage would end like this, sitting in a cold courtroom, watching my soon-to-be ex-wife smirk at me like I was a fool. But here I was. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, washing everything in a sickly glow. Rows of wooden benches stretched behind me, filled with people who weren't here for me, but for their own battles. Divorce court was a brutal place, where love died in legal arguments and settlement numbers, where promises were dissected into who got what and who paid whom. I could hear the rustling of papers from the lawyers, the slow tick-tick-tick of the courtroom clock, the murmurs of other cases being whispered behind us. But the loudest sound in the room? Her laughter. Soft at first, like she was trying to contain it. But then she stopped pretending. She sat across from me in her perfectly pressed beige blazer, her hair done up like she was about to be interviewed for a corporate job, and she laughed. Like this was funny. Like I was a joke. Like this whole trial, the custody fights, the financial struggles, the years I had given to her, meant nothing to her. I felt my jaw tighten, my hands curling into fists under the table. I was tired. Not just physically, but tired of her winning. She had taken so much from me already. My home, my money, my peace. And now, she wanted to take my dignity too. I refused to let that happen. The judge entered, a stout woman with silver hair and piercing eyes. She wasted no time getting started. Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, let's keep this civil. We're here to finalize the divorce and address the financial claims in dispute. Financial claims. That was what this all boiled down to. She wasn't fighting for love. She wasn't fighting for fairness. She was fighting to see how much she could take from me before she walked away for good. Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man who looked like he billed by the second, stood up. Your Honor, my client has been the primary caretaker in this marriage. She has made sacrifices in her career, in her personal growth, in every aspect of her life to support her husband. I almost laughed. Sacrifices? She hadn't sacrificed a damn thing. I was the one who worked 12-hour shifts to make sure she didn't have to worry about rent. I was the one who picked up the pieces when she blew through credit cards like they were disposable. I was the one who stayed through the lies, the betrayal, the night she didn't come home, just so I could keep the marriage alive a little longer. And now, she sat there, reaping the benefits of my suffering. I leaned back in my chair, biting my tongue as my lawyer stood up to argue. Your Honor, my client provided financial support for the household. He worked tirelessly while Mrs. Carter made personal spending decisions that led to unnecessary debt. He's already given her a fair settlement. My lawyer was doing his job, fighting for what was fair. But it didn't matter. Not when she sat there, looking so pleased with herself. And then, the moment came. The moment that would change everything. Her lawyer brought up my income. He makes more than enough to continue supporting Mrs. Carter's lifestyle. If anything, she deserves more for the emotional strain this marriage caused her. That's when she laughed again. This time, it wasn't soft. It wasn't hidden. It was loud. I turned to her, my blood boiling, my heart pounding. You think this is funny? I said, my voice low but sharp. She tilted her head, smirking. I think it's hilarious. And that was the final straw. I had one move left. Something that would silence her. Something that would make the entire courtroom go still. Something that would remind her exactly who she was dealing with. I was about to stand up. And when I did, everything would change. The moment she laughed, I knew I couldn't hold back anymore. The courtroom wasn't loud. No one else dared to laugh with her. But that single sound was enough to slice through my patience like a blade. Even the judge raised an eyebrow, tapping her gavel lightly. Mrs. Carter, please remember this is a formal proceeding. But my ex-wife? She barely flinched. She just smirked, tilting her head like she was enjoying a private joke. And maybe she was. Maybe, in her mind, she had already won. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep myself in check. I could feel my lawyer's warning glance from the side, silently telling me not to react, not to give her any satisfaction. But I wasn't going to sit there and be humiliated in front of a judge, lawyers, and strangers who didn't know my story. So I sat up straight, leaned forward, and met her eyes. You think this is funny? I asked, my voice low but sharp. She gave a little shrug. Oh, come on. This whole thing? It's ridiculous. I could see the arrogance dripping off her, like she thought I was nothing but an obstacle, something she had already beaten. I glanced at the bastard sitting next to her, her lawyer, yes, but also the same guy I had once suspected she had something going on with before we separated. He didn't meet my eyes. Coward. I took a slow breath, my fist tightening under the table. The judge cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, control your temper. Mrs. Carter, I advise you to take these proceedings seriously." She sighed dramatically, like this whole divorce process was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "Your Honor," her lawyer continued smoothly, "we would like to proceed with Mrs. Carter's financial requests. Given Mr. Carter's annual income, his ability to sustain a comfortable lifestyle is undeniable. Therefore, we are requesting a fair alimony package." Fair. That word made me want to laugh. She had cheated. She had spent my money like water. She had lied through her teeth while smiling at me across the dinner table. And now, after all of that, she was still sitting there, acting like I owed her something. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as her lawyer droned on. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. She had dismissed me entirely, like I was already beneath her concern. And that's when I made my decision. She wanted to act like I was nothing? Like my sacrifices didn't matter? Like this whole trial was just another win for her? Fine. I'd remind her exactly who I was. I reached up and started unbuttoning my shirt. 1, 2, 3. The entire courtroom shifted. Murmurs rippled through the rows of spectators. My lawyer whispered urgently, "What the hell are you doing?" I ignored him. I stood up, pulling my shirt open, revealing what had been hidden for so long. The scars. Deep, jagged reminders of the accident I had suffered while working overtime to support her expensive lifestyle. The burns on my shoulder from the warehouse fire where I nearly lost my arm. The still visible bruising from a surgery I had to undergo alone, because she had been too busy, working late, aka screwing someone else. The room went dead silent. Even the judge looked stunned. My ex-wife, finally stopped smirking. I locked eyes with her, letting her see the truth. "You see this?" My voice was steady, but filled with quiet rage. She didn't answer. "You remember how I got these?" I took a step toward the stand, my voice carrying through the silence. "No? Let me remind you. I was working double shifts to pay off your credit card debt. I was busting my ass in a factory while you were out drinking, shopping, and pretending you were some rich celebrity. And where were you when I was in the hospital? With him." Her face lost all color. Everyone was watching. The judge leaned forward slightly, intrigued now. I turned to her lawyer. "You want to talk about fair? You think it's fair that I spent years killing myself to give her everything, only to end up in this courtroom watching her laugh at me?" Silence. Pure, absolute silence. And for the first time since this divorce started, I saw something on my ex-wife's face that I had never seen before. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear that she had finally pushed too far. I buttoned my shirt back up, sitting down calmly. The silence dragged on for what felt like forever. Then, finally, the judge spoke. "Mr. Carter, I believe it would be best if we took a short recess." She wasn't wrong, because after this, nothing would ever be the same again. The silence stretched. No one spoke. The judge's eyes lingered on me longer than they should have, as if she was trying to process what had just happened. My lawyer sat still, stunned into speechlessness, while my ex-wife's own attorney shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly regretting ever taking her case. And her? For the first time since this entire circus began, she wasn't smirking anymore. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, as if she had never expected me to fight back. I had been the fool in her mind, the doormat, the man she had chewed up and spat out without a second thought. But not anymore. Now, in front of everyone, she had no choice but to face the truth. The judge sighed, rubbing her temples. "I agree that we should take a short recess before continuing. We will reconvene in 20 minutes. She banged her gavel, but no one moved. Not right away. Everyone was still processing what had just happened. Then, one by one, people began whispering. The spectators in the back exchanged hushed words. The other attorneys in the room, who had their own cases to worry about, glanced over in thinly veiled curiosity. I could even hear someone in the back say, "Did you see that? Holy hell, did you see those scars?" And my ex-wife? She was frozen. I could tell she was panicking, even though she was trying desperately to keep her composure. She wanted to save face, but it was too late. The moment I exposed the truth, she lost control of the narrative. And that terrified her. I stepped out into the courthouse hallway, rolling my shoulders, trying to shake off the tension. I could feel eyes on me from every direction, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt like I had taken something back, something she had stolen from me over the years. My dignity. My ex-wife stormed out right behind me, her heels clicking against the tile floor far too aggressively. "Carter," she snapped, grabbing my wrist. I turned, slowly, looking down at her. She never used to call me by my last name. That was new. A sign of desperation. What do you want? I asked, my voice calm, completely unfazed. What the hell was that? She hissed. Her eyes darted around, making sure no one else was close enough to eavesdrop. I smirked. That? That was the truth. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to deny it. But what could she say? Everyone saw it. Everyone heard me. She had built her entire case on making me look like some heartless monster, like some selfish husband who left her with nothing. But that lie had just been shattered in front of the entire courtroom. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain. You just humiliated me, she seethed, stepping closer, voice low but furious. In front of everyone. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, you mean like how you laughed at me during a divorce trial? How you treated this entire thing like a joke while trying to bleed me dry? Her nostrils flared, her face going red. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Do you know what's dramatic? Spending years breaking my back to give you a good life, only for you to cheat, lie, and try to rob me blind. That's dramatic. She blinked rapidly, completely off balance. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who wasn't begging, the one who wasn't pleading for her to be fair. She was used to me rolling over, not standing tall. She swallowed, straightening her shoulders. None of that matters anymore. The judge still has to rule. And let's be honest, she folded her arms, trying to regain control. I still have the upper hand. You don't have any actual proof of financial hardship, and my lawyer. Her voice died in her throat. Because her lawyer? Her expensive, smug attorney was staring at me from across the hall. And his face? It was pale. He wasn't looking at me like I was a losing case anymore. He was looking at me like I was a problem he didn't know how to fix. I tilted my head, giving her a mocking smile. Are you sure about that? Her lips pressed together. She was rattled. Good. Because I wasn't done. When we returned to the courtroom, everything felt different. The judge tapped her gavel again. Let's continue. I sat down, perfectly relaxed. She, on the other hand? She couldn't sit still. Her lawyer cleared his throat, flipping through his notes like he was trying to figure out how to fix this disaster. My client maintains that she is entitled to spousal support due to the emotional and financial damages caused by the divorce, he started, but even he didn't sound confident anymore. My lawyer stood. Your Honor, if I may? The judge nodded. Given the evidence my client has provided, including his medical records, work history, and financial contributions to the marriage, it is clear that Mrs. Carter's claims of financial dependency are grossly exaggerated. Furthermore, Mr. Carter's testimony about his injuries, sustained while working to support the household, raises significant questions about Mrs. Carter's credibility. The judge turned to her lawyer. Do you have a response? The guy hesitated. Then, finally, he sighed. We request time to reconsider our claims. Checkmate. My ex-wife snapped her head toward him, furious. What? No. We talked about this. We agreed. Mrs. Carter, the judge said, her voice sharp. Control yourself. The moment she realized she was losing was glorious. The confidence? Gone. The smirk? Gone. The laugh she had taunted me with? Gone. Now, all that was left was panic. She never thought I'd fight back. But I did. And now? Now, she was watching everything she wanted slip away. The judge leaned back in her chair. Given the circumstances, I believe it is only fair to conduct a thorough review before ruling on any financial obligations. Court is adjourned until further notice. She banged the gavel. Game over. The judge's gavel had barely touched wood before my ex-wife erupted. No. She barked, slamming her hand down on the table. This isn't fair. Her lawyer visibly winced. He knew. The courtroom, still thick with the weight of my revelation, held its breath. I could feel it, the shift. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the defeated husband, the paycheck she thought she could cash for life. I was the problem she never saw coming. The judge, unimpressed by her outburst, raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Carter, you will control yourself, or I will hold you in contempt. But she wasn't thinking straight anymore. Her perfectly manicured, calculated facade was cracking, breaking apart in real time, and she knew it. She turned to her lawyer, desperate. Do something. But the man, who had once been so confident, only adjusted his tie and sighed. My client requests time to restructure her financial claims, he said, voice strained, like he was trying to salvage something from the wreckage of her case. The judge leaned back in her chair, thinking. Then she turned to me. Mr. Carter, given the evidence you've presented today, I am postponing any ruling on financial obligations pending further review. Your ex-wife's request for spousal support is, at this time, denied. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. From her side of the table? Dead silence. Her jaw dropped. Her lawyer rubbed his temple. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I took a slow breath and turned toward my lawyer. Give it to her. He nodded, sliding a sealed envelope across the table toward my ex-wife's lawyer. You might want to look at this before you push for more, my attorney said casually. Her lawyer hesitated, then opened it. The moment he saw what was inside, his entire face drained of color. He leaned in, whispering something furiously to my ex-wife. She snatched the papers from him, scanning the first page, then the second, then the third, and that's when I saw it. Her smirk disappeared completely. Her fingers trembled as she flipped the last page, reading the final words. Her entire world collapsed in that moment. What is this? She whispered. But she already knew. Her voice, once full of arrogance, was small now. Weak. My lawyer folded his hands neatly on the table. That, Mrs. Carter, is an audit of your personal finances for the last 3 years. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked cornered, like a rat trapped with no way out. You see, I said, leaning forward, matching the condescending tone she used on me for years, while I was breaking my back working overtime to pay for our life together. You were moving money. The color in her face vanished. The joint account? The one you claimed you needed my contributions for. I continued. You weren't using it for groceries, bills, or the mortgage. You were funneling money into an offshore account. The air in the courtroom changed. Even the judge blinked, eyes narrowing. Her lawyer muttered a quiet, "Oh, Christ." The whispers started again, spreading like wildfire. I heard someone say she was stealing from him. My ex-wife looked at me, shaking now. You had me investigated? Of course I did, I said smoothly. You thought I was stupid? That I'd just hand you whatever you asked for? I sat back, feeling the weight of my victory settle in. The judge exhaled slowly. Mrs. Carter, do you have any explanation for this? My ex-wife's lips moved, but no sound came out. She was done. Finished. There was no coming back from this. The judge didn't even hesitate. She slammed her gavel down. Given this new evidence, I am dismissing any and all financial claims made by Mrs. Carter. In addition, I am ordering a full investigation into the misappropriation of funds from the joint account. Her lawyer actually put his head in his hands. I stood up. I had one. And her? She just sat there, staring at the papers, realizing what she had just lost. Outside the courtroom, the last words I ever said to her. She chased me down the hallway. Carter, please. I stopped, turned. She was crying now, begging. I let her stand there, in her expensive outfit, the woman who once laughed at me in court, now standing in front of me with nothing left. You don't understand, she whispered. I wasn't thinking. I tilted my head. No, I think you were thinking exactly what you were doing. She swallowed hard. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as she realized the truth. I didn't hate her. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt nothing. And that was what terrified her the most. I gave her one last look. Then I walked away. I never looked back. By the end of the month, she was under financial investigation. By the end of the year, she was flat broke, struggling to rebuild the life she had burned to the ground. And me? I was finally free. Because the day she laughed at me in court, she thought she had already won. But the day I took off my shirt and showed the world what I had survived, that was the day she realized I was never the fool. She was. And she paid for it every single day after that.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.